Welcome to the Startups Roundtable podcast, where we discuss the science and art of startups with founders and the broader startup community. I'm Tony Hackett, and I've spent over a third of my B2B sales career either working for early stage startups or as a go-to-market and social selling mentor for founders and their teams. In each episode, we will explore various topics, including decision-making, team building, and growth strategies. Before we meet today's guest, I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet. Here in Sydney, it's the Gadigal people. We pay respect to elders past, present and emerging, and extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people attending today. The ability to qualify, route and schedule meetings from your website is the cornerstone of effective customer connection. With the right technology, businesses now have the capability to provide their online visitors with an easy way to set up a meeting at any time. Today's guest is Caddie CEO and founder Alan Nowodgrodsky, who will introduce how his exciting startup has developed technology to provide a seamless customer experience and improve outreach efforts. Alan, welcome to the Startups Roundtable. Maybe you can get us underway with a bit about yourself and what you and the team at Caddie are up to right now.
Thanks, Tony. Pleasure being here. Yeah, happy to give you a really quick introduction. For those listening, my background goes back into marketing. Started there in university, worked in digital marketing for a few companies, and one day discovered product. And I was like, well, what product is a lot more fun than building websites? And that started about a 10-year career in product management, really on the engineering side, and led me to the very end of my career where I actually connected both things together, building product and really helping marketers. And so that's what led to Caddie and really this idea of like, how do we make it not just easier for customers to connect with you on your website, but how do we make it a better experience? How do we make it easier and really focus on conversions? So it's been a fun journey connecting product and marketing together.
Alan, you talk about connecting with customers. My expectation is that you would have laid out multiple customer journeys to try and work out how you bring this streamlining, this automation together. Could you maybe share a little bit about that process, the early days of working out what you could do, what to do, and what not to do?
Yeah, I don't even think I was trying to start a company. I mean, I always knew that I wanted to do something in the near future. That was on my mind. You know, I think a lot of people probably listen. They're like, yeah, I've been thinking of something I want to build. And I was in that bucket, and I was working as a VP of marketing and a dual role with a VP of product. And we had a bunch of trouble in our website, and conversion was pretty poor. And I was just looking for, okay, so we've got a traditional contact form on our website, first name, last name, job title, and so on. And we're losing a lot of people there. And I just thought, let's go see who's doing it better. Let's go sign up for a different company who has a similar sales motion and see who's doing it better. And so I went to the ones that we all know, like the Slacks and Googles of the world. And then I was like, okay, that's interesting. They're kind of having the same problem. And I actually started writing down what I was observing, and that led me to about 50 different software companies initially that I focused on. So I signed up for 50 different software companies, completed their form, took on their first sales call, and I wasn't really sure what I was looking for. I was just taking notes. How long did it take for them to reach out? Who was reaching out? Was it an SDR? Was it an account executive? What kind of questions were they asking me? And then I remember I got to the end of it and I was like, oh my God, there's like everybody is struggling with the same thing, from the 10-person startup to Google. And, you know, that's when I was like, oh, hold on, I can do product. What if, you know, so I kind of switched the hat on and I was like, what if we change things up? What if we do this? And so, of course, the first crack at it was pretty terrible and it didn't quite work. But, you know, you try a few times and eventually you get something that's like, okay, there's something interesting here. And so that was really how it started.
The research that you did, I suppose, when you say it now and look at it, was really fundamental. But working through and doing that trawling, it must have felt a little bit like hard work until you got to the point of actually there could be an opening in the market for us.
I don't even think it's that hard. And perhaps that came from the product angle. So in product, we have the challenge where we're building something. It might take engineering horsepower, perhaps one engineer, perhaps 10. And we have to design it. And we have to think about how to build it. And then we spend hundreds, if not thousands of hours building a thing. And then we give it to a customer and the customer's like, I don't know about it. And, you know, we end up realizing just how many thousands of hours we throw in the trash. And so in product, you have to get really good at validating. Is this worth doing? Is this worth building? What is the right thing to build? Because you can't just like try 3 things. And so I think I applied a lot of that. And so for me, the validation was fun because it's like, that's where you really discover what you should be building. And it doesn't, you know, it seems like homework. The first step is hard because you don't know how to start. But once you're doing it, it's just easy because you're learning.
How do you then add to it the business value element, which is going to be paramount to you as a startup founder, but the real value to the end user customer? How do you then approach people who have been getting on fine? I'll probably put that in air quotes, getting on fine without you, but then you're having to have them realize that there's a real win for them in getting involved with Caddie.
It reminds me a little bit of a story. I went to one of our first customers and I said, "Hey, I went on your website and I see you've got a bunch of these big forms. You're probably losing a lot of people." And they're like, "I don't know. Like that's not a priority." And I said, "Okay, well, call me back. If you ever look at that data and if that data looks bad, because you might be losing a lot of people, you might not be." So a month goes by. They call me on a Thursday. They say, "Can you meet tomorrow?" "Yeah, sure, I can meet tomorrow." So meet on Friday. They said, "We looked at the data, conversion's terrible. Can you be live by Tuesday?" Tuesday was the beginning of the quarter. They wanted to have new, fresh data for conversion. I was like, honestly, at that time it was really challenging, but we figured out a way to do it and we did it. And the conversion gains was phenomenal. But I think the thing that I learned there is that you can help get the horse to water, but you can't force them to drink. If they are not in that state of mind where they care about conversion and they're paying attention to what that funnel looks like, I can only bring some level of awareness, but at the end of the day, like we each have our own businesses that we're running or that we're part of, and we have different challenges we're focused on, and force you to pay attention to this challenge rather say, "Hey, here's a challenge. Here's a problem that you might not have seen. And, if at any point it becomes a priority, like let's talk." But I feel like the same is true for pretty much every product that we're selling is we could, whether it's us or you or somebody else, right? Like we can only just bring some awareness to it and let them figure out where it goes in the priority list.
There's a limited amount of time in your day. What sector, or is there a sector, or is there a level of granularity that you focus on to bring your greatest value and also your greatest results from?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of teams that start, if someone listening here has got one or two salespeople, it's not that difficult to manage your inbound funnel. Like you maybe get 10 leads a week, and then you can look at them, like you can actually see them and like, "Oh, wow, these 3 look great." And I can go and click on LinkedIn and look them up and then decide I'm going to give it to Jane or Bob. And then they're just going to reach out. And that's not that big a deal. When you get to like 3 and 4 and 5 and 10 and 30 and 50 salespeople, then it's like a serious operation that someone needs to be there, like filtering and handing out and who's going to get what. And then suddenly, like, before it used to take 20 minutes for you to determine if it's a good lead or not and who to give it to. And now it's taking 2 days or 3 days or 5 days. And, and then we get to a point of like, I'm not going to name the company, but someone came to me and said, "I tried to buy a payroll solution and I reached out to 2 companies. One reached back out to me within 1 day. The other one took 45 days. And of course, you buy the one that reached out in 2 days. And 45 days is a really extreme, but it's a true story. But I think it's like as the company grows, like this machine becomes slower and more painful. And then you start feeling the pain of not having a really good contact sales experience.
How do you look for the trends in the market right now? Are there 1 or 2 things that you pay most attention to as you look to that Horizon 2, Horizon 3 world for yourself?
It's a challenge because if you look out and what everybody else is doing, at best, you're going to know what the trends were last quarter. And that's what everybody's focused on right now. I think one of the ways that we do it, and we actually just did it last week, is getting together with your own team on an offsite type of activity where you're getting together. Maybe you're putting down your laptops and you're asking the question, like, what are we seeing? What are the things that we are collectively seeing that others don't have the benefit to see? And what does that mean about, what our customers are telling us? And so I think it's more crystal balling rather than like looking out and saying, "Oh, clearly there's a pattern. We should chase that ball." And so we're trying to use like, what do we know that others don't in terms of data? What are our customers telling us that, they're not telling other people because they're our customers? And so I think it's more along those lines. And then just trying to see what is the world, or almost like paint a vision of the future that we want to live in. We actually are fortunate to use our own product. Not everybody can say that, right? Sometimes, but we're fortunate that we can do that. And so we often ask us like, what do we want? What do we want to have on our website? What do we think is going to drive our conversion? And then we think about, okay, great. What should we build next?
Alan, you remind me of an experience I had a few years ago now, but working with a startup. It was the early days of e-billing. And in those days, it was truly the early days, and no VP in a telco or a utility actually had a budget for e-billing. And it became my responsibility, or any of the sales people in the company I was with, to identify the business problem and try and work out if the capability of the e-billing software could actually help them solve that as I'm hearing you speak, I'm imagining that as being part of your opportunity and challenge as well, where organizations may have business problems which they wouldn't immediately align with what Caddie does. Is that a true story? Is that where you're needing to explain to people where that problem they've got, they need to wake up in the morning thinking about what you can do to help them?
It's hard to say because a lot of people come already knowing what problem they want to solve, but they might not have seen the complete picture. They might only be thinking about part of that problem. And that's, I think, the great opportunity. When someone comes in and it's like ready to buy based on one problem and you can eliminate the second or third problem, then it makes the business case much stronger, because the business case on just that one problem might have been like questionable and they might have been able to pull it through with internal stakeholders. Once you eliminate the second and third, that can be like the tipping point. So that's always what I'm looking for, is like, what is the reason that they're coming? What is the problem they're looking to solve? And then what's the opportunity that they haven't seen yet? So I'm always trying to think about it from that perspective.
Yeah, I think you might have landed on just at the end of your comment then to where I was trying to position, that is where they mightn't have seen it before. So there is a level of education, but there's also a level of visioning that you're needing to bring to the conversation as well. It's not just all about function and foundational engagement and correspondence. Do you find that the path to your go-to-market is evolving rapidly, or it's more about fine-tuning now? Maybe you could speak about how your go-to-market started and where you see it moving toward in the near future.
Yeah, what's interesting is that a lot of people talk about PLG these days. What they're saying is self-serve purchasing. They're saying, come to the website, decide what you want to buy, click a button, start using it. But product-led growth really either has maybe like a dual meaning, but it's not necessarily meant to be self-serve, but rather like, how is the product driving the growth itself? And yes, we could go out and acquire customers by throwing dollars or whatever other mechanisms are. But one of the ways that we are excited about what we're doing at Caddie, and I think a lot of companies have the same opportunity and they need to continue exploring farther. It's like, how is the product that we have creating loops that allow other customers to discover it? For our case, is if you go buy a product from one of our customers and you go try to request a demo from a software company, regardless of what they're selling, at the bottom, you'll see powered by Caddie. And they'll say, oh, wow, that's if I happen to be a marketer or a sales leader or some, CFO, that was a much better experience than when I bought this other solution. And then that triggers, I wonder if I should have that on my website. And so we're really thinking not just about, how do we invest in traditional marketing, but also how do we make our product sell itself? And, I think that's the tough thing, maybe tough thing, but also the great opportunity is that it's very experimental. You can try different things and see what works. And you don't really need a lot of money. You just need to get creative about how do your customers engage with your product and how can you create more engagement with potential customers.
The idea of experiments is something that's near and dear to my heart. I had the opportunity to work with a different company way back, and they brought some people in from Amazon. This is maybe 15, 20 years ago, thereabouts. And they truly had their black belt in experimentation. And I learned so much about it. The charm of experiments is that they don't necessarily have to land, but they can advise strategy. Is that part of your thinking with experiments, that you're looking for the data out of them as much as it is for the product path?
Yeah, I kind of see it as like we have we believe that, in PLG, at least in this context that I described, is a very meaningful part of the future. And I think about myself as a short-term pessimist and a long-term optimist. And if you're going to get into experimentation, I encourage you to use that mindset of this experiment will fail and the next one will fail and the one after that will fail. But if I keep doing that, I will succeed. And that's in some way we have to pick a vision of the future or a path in the future that we want to follow. And then just assume that these things are going to fail. So move really quickly through it, validate really quickly, likely validate negatively, and then just move on to the one that is working. And so, yeah, as you go along, it gets always not necessarily better, but you get closer to the actual good answer. So to me, it's almost like a game. And so it's a fun game to play. The failures are nothing. They're just part of that game because eventually you're going to succeed. What
brings you the most joy in your role?
I mean, I think it's tough. I think anyone who's got their own business or sitting in a CEO seat, of whether it's big or small, this just every day the context is switching 100 times a day from sales to marketing to people and so on. And so I think me personally, somebody asked me today, who are you? And then I just really think a lot. And I think I came back with I'm a creator. I like to create things, whether I'm creating like a document, some people make fun of me is like, I enjoy writing documentation because I get to create something, there was nothing there before. But of course, like creating product is more fun than creating documentation. So I think anytime that I'm creating, I have fun with that. And so I try to spend as much time as I can when reasonable creating something.
Sort of fits in with the whole experimentation as well, always looking for something new and being able to bring some of your thought process and your innovation and vision into the everyday. When you look at Caddie and building a team, what would be some reflections and maybe some notes you would share with potential early stage founders as to going and finding great team members and getting your team to grow?
Yeah, so I think the journey as Caddie, to give an idea, is I spend the first year of the company working by myself, just on my own. And part of that is that I had done other ventures before, and I fall into the trap of being alone. I mean, as the word describes, is lonely. Like it's just lonely. And we crave human connection, and we crave to find a co-founder or a partner that's going to be really good at a thing and help us solve that problem. But the reality is we don't know what we're building yet. We don't know what kind of co-founder are we looking for. We don't know what kind of skill sets we're looking for. And so I spent that first year on my own building the product, or experimenting, validating, and then eventually building like a very lean MVP and, getting a couple customers, getting our first few dollars. And then, at that time, decided to apply to Y Combinator, the famous startup accelerator. And then I got an interview to the program, and then I looked around. I was like, oh my God, if I get in, there's no way I can do this on my own. And some people told me like, yeah, no, this is really challenging. Like this is when it really like kicks up. And so at that point I had enough of an understanding of what I wanted to build to understand like what kind of co-founder I was looking for. And I think once I knew that, it was actually really easy to try to say, okay, that's exactly that person I'm looking for. And then when you find that person, just go all in, in terms of trying to win that person over and really, bring your best sales self, whether you're in sales or not, just like, get that person excited about what you're working on. And so I was lucky to be able to do that. Brought my co-founder, went through the Y Combinator experience. And as we hire our first few people, similar challenge. It's like, you don't know what you're building. You don't know what you're marketing exactly. And then once you do identify that, go all in on that person that you think is fantastic. And so I think we've done that a couple of times with success, and excited to keep growing.
What was your accelerator experience? Maybe one or two things that surprised you, just far exceeded your expectations.
When we look around and, we are struggling with whatever challenge we're struggling in our business, we have this tendency to like believe that somebody else has the answer. And so we go out and we ask people, and oftentimes like we feel uncomfortable that like those people don't really know exactly what we're going through. So we try to take their feedback, but it's difficult. And then you get into something like Y Combinator, and like the caliber of talent is just unbelievable. And the mentors there are not just people that are like successful at marketing. They're like people who've sold their companies for billions of dollars. And then you get to spend one-on-one time asking them whatever you want. And you realize even they don't have the answers. And I think that's a really, and then maybe that sounds like a negative thing, but it's actually a really positive thing, because what they're helping you with is like creating your own confidence and helping you identify not what the answer is for you, but the answers that you should ignore. And so if you thought you had like 10 options, they're like, don't worry about these 7, because these are a giant waste of your time based on our experience and based on what we see other companies do. These 3, what do you think about those 3? And so it's this interesting balance of like maybe removing decision-making friction or maybe avoiding bad decision-making while still actually making your own decisions, because no one's going to make them for you. No one knows the answer. And like you have to, craft your own path.
That's a fantastic share to the podcast, and I thank you. It also answers a question that I ask. It's the only question I ask every guest I have, and that is around mentors and coaches. And I think you just hit that really well. You do the research and you run experiments. How are you at allowing intuition, gut feel, to come into your decision-making process as well?
So it's a really funny anecdote on this. And I don't know if you read the book Blink, which is a book that talks about that intuition. And I read the first chapter and I was like, my intuition tells me that I should stop reading this book. But then I was like, hold on, but then is my intuition right or wrong? Like I got into this interesting like cyclical loop of, but then if my intuition's right, I should keep reading the book. And so I think intuition is useful in deciding what experiment to run. And then once you decide what experiment to run, throw the intuition out the window and then just try to look at the data objectively, because it's just so easy to design an experiment that will lead you to a false positive or a false negative. that it's almost like choose the experiment with conviction that it will succeed. And as soon as you've chosen, throw that conviction out of the window and assume the experiment will fail. And so then now you just like, how do you validate that this, this is an experiment that's going to fail? And so I kind of lean really into the experiment and then assume it will fail.
I find that I have over time, I've lent more on data as I've been able to find it, but then I sort of start looking for the data from the position of intuition and sometimes work out how far to weave back and how far to stay away from it. But you've got to have both. You can't just rely on the one. Do you find that your customer conversations are changing markedly now or subtly?
Given like market conditions?
Yes.
No, sorry, it's more of a question. Oh yeah. Yes and no. Anyone out there thinking starting a company, what kind of product, should I lean into? And one of the reasons that I was excited about pursuing Caddie is that we get to work on things that impact, as they say, the cash register. We get to impact sales and marketing, and anyone there thinking of going into things that are far away from the cash register, let's say things like operations or human resources, like software in those spaces, they're really tough to prove ROI, right? Because inevitably, like, how do you prove investing $1 into that HR solution will eventually lead to specific time saving? And so the good thing is that products that are closer to the cash register, they tend to benefit in economies that are not as great, because you have the fortune to say, oh, no, the ROI is very clear. We can prove it, or you can even run it as an experiment, see the ROI. And if you like it, continue. And so I think those who are in areas where the product saves them money or is clear impact to cash, you still have an advantage. And I think, we can still push hard and even in this economy.
Well, it seems like a pretty solid place for us to wrap today, to have a solution that has an impact that can hit the bottom line for an organization. Sounds like a terrific place to be building a startup. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm excited for Caddie's future, and I appreciate you taking the time today.
Thanks, Tony. A real pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Feedback is always welcome, and I would appreciate introductions to potential future guests to invite onto the podcast. But that's it for today. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.